Hello and welcome to The Top Story, the podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Xizhi. Coming up in this edition, Syrian ministers from the newly formed transitional government have met with members of the ousted Bashar al-Assad administration to organize the transfer of state institutions. South Korean lawmakers are set to vote again this weekend on the opposition's move to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. And the suspect charged with murder in a shooting of the CEO of one of the largest health insurers in the United States has made a defiant appearance in court. We begin with the latest in Syria. The transfer of power is now underway as Syrian ministers from the newly formed transitional government have met members of the ousted Bashar al-Assad's administration to organize the transfer of state institutions and ensure the continuity of public services. Caretaker Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashar says the general leadership has tasked his cabinet to manage the country's affairs until March next year. The transitional government aims to assume control of ministries, reintroduce employees to their posts, and restore essential services across Syria. Meanwhile, fighting among different forces continues within the country. A Turkish security source says the National Intelligence Agency of Turkey destroyed military supplies under Kurdish control in northeastern Syria, including 12 trucks loaded with missiles and heavy weapons. Israel has ordered its forces to create a defense zone in southern Syria. Its military has confirmed that it carried out attacks on Syria's navy. But the Israel Defense Forces deny that it is advancing towards Damascus. Philip Crowther with the Associated Press has more from the Syrian capital.
Well, look, it's been a remarkably peaceful and orderly transition here in Damascus so far. At the head of this interim government now stands Mohammed al-Bashar. He was the leader of Idlib province. This was even while Bashar al-Assad was still in power here in Damascus. That is precisely where the insurgency began that made its way so quickly here to Damascus. The insurgency, of course, led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS. Now, al-Bashar was at that government meeting that happened here in Damascus that included a lot of government ministers from the time still of Bashar al-Assad. There were 4 ministers missing, including those of defense and foreign affairs. Still, it is quite remarkable to see this transition ongoing. The outgoing Prime Minister Jalali also at that meeting here in Damascus. You might remember, very significant moment in this swift overthrow of the leadership of al-Assad here in Syria was that video put out by the Prime Minister Jalali saying that he was going to stay put despite Assad fleeing the country, that he would want to be part of an orderly transition, and he very much now is.
That was Philip Crowther in Damascus. Tens of thousands of Syrian asylum seekers are in limbo after some European countries put their applications on hold following the fall of President Bashar al-Assad and his government. Evangela Sipsis is more from Athens.
What started as a moment of celebration for thousands has quickly turned into a cloud of worry. Syrians abroad who initially embraced the change in leadership are now left grappling with questions such as what the future might look like. A number of European countries decided to put on hold asylum applications for thousands of Syrians.
A completely wrong move. Syria is unstable, facing hunger, poverty, ruined infrastructure, and no basic resources like electricity or water. We don't know what to expect. If asylum was needed before Assad, it's needed even more now. The future for Syrians and our country is entirely uncertain at this point.
With so much uncertainty about Syria's future, governments across Europe are scrambling to figure out their next steps. The political landscape has shifted and policies for Syrians seeking asylum are being rethought. On Monday, several EU countries, including Germany, home to an estimated 1 million Syrians, Austria, Sweden, Greece, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands, decided to pause asylum applications. More nations are expected to follow. The decision, impacting tens of thousands of pending claims, comes amid growing support across Europe. Some governments are pushing for stricter immigration controls, including deportations, a move that the United Nations finds worrisome.
Extremely important that we don't see any action from any international actor that destroys the possibility for this transformation in Syria to take place.
As the future of Syria hangs in balance, so does the fate of thousands who are seeking safety abroad. For now, Syrians face an uncertain road ahead, caught between a better tomorrow and the harsh realities of shifting asylum policies across Europe.
That was Evangelos Sipsis reporting in Athens. Also on the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has testified in court in Tel Aviv in a corruption trial. He's the first sitting Israeli leader to take the stand as a criminal defendant. Netanyahu has promised to knock down the corruption allegations against him. The Israeli Prime Minister is already facing an international arrest warrant as he's accused of committing war crimes in Gaza. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
Prime Minister is testifying in a court that's quite a big event. These are the easier days for Netanyahu. Why so? At this time, he is now standing against the defense trials, against his own, the defense lawyers, against his own attorneys. Come January, in a few weeks' time, then Netanyahu will stand in front of the prosecutor, and that, of course, will be much more challenging. But it was quite a big day here. Protesters from both sides, those supporting Netanyahu, those opposing Netanyahu, they were here. There were no clashes reported, but quite a massive police presence. A lot of people from both camps. Benjamin Netanyahu, clearly a controversial figure. For some, the biggest head of state that can be, and for others, the biggest evil that can be. And when he comes to testify, it just shows once again the very big divide that exists in Israeli society.
I have been waiting 8 years for this day to present the truth. I have been waiting to finally blow up the deluded and absurd charges against me. For 8 years I have been waiting to reveal the method, a brutal hunt against me because these investigations were born in sin. There was no offence, so they were looking for an offence. They haven't found a crime, so they invented one.
How come then he tried to delay this testimony again and again and again? These are some of the questions that he has been asked and will be asked. The first day of testimony now is over. Tomorrow, another day of testimony, a very dramatic time for Israel as a sitting prime minister for the first time is sitting in court, coming to testify as someone who's put up for trial.
That was Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Turning to South Korea. The country's lawmakers are set to vote again this weekend on the opposition's move to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. This follows the arrest of the country's police chief in connection with President Yoon's failed martial law declaration. A special investigation unit says it has raided the presidential office, the National Police, the Seoul Metropolitan Police, and the National Assembly. Police have also entered the Joint Chiefs of Staff headquarters. The head of the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials says the CIO will attempt to arrest Yoon with or without a warrant if conditions are met. Meanwhile, the former defense minister has attempted suicide at a detention facility following his arrest. For more, here's Jack Barton in Seoul.
Every day now there seems to be so many moving parts to what is still a story that is shocking South Koreans. People stunned with the news that the former defense minister Kim Yong-hyun had tried to commit suicide at the detention center where he is being held east of Seoul. Now he has tried to take a lot of the responsibility for what happened, saying it was sort of all his fault and asking for subordinates to be given a sort of a pass because he was ordering them to do things, and he's tried to take some of the limelight off of President Yoon Suk-yeol. But while he was the first to be arrested, the picture is emerging that Yoon may have actually been the ringleader. But as all these charges mount, of course, this attempted suicide bid, according to local media, it happened in the bathroom at the detention center. Somehow he got his hands on some cord, but the injuries he received were not life-threatening. Somebody spotted him very quickly, and he's now being observed in a secure facility, and they plan to keep him there for the time being. From a press conference from the Law Association here, and they say the evidence is fairly compelling, that what Yoon did amount to insurrection. As we hear more and more testimony from those involved, it seems more and more likely that he will be charged as a ringleader. That does not have presidential immunity, and it can carry an indefinite jail term. In fact, it can carry a potential death sentence. However, he's still in office. That could be the case case for a long time, because the lawyers said under Article 71 of the Constitution, if there is any chance that the president may return to office, he can remain as president. So even if he is charged, he can remain as president unless ultimately he is found guilty in a court trial. Even if he is impeached, he can still remain president until the Constitutional Court investigates the impeachment motion and a majority of judges rule off on it.
That was Jack Barton with the latest on South Korea's political turmoil. In Africa, the new Mauritian Prime Minister has asked for an independent review of a deal with the UK on the future of the Chagos Islands. The agreement announced this year gives sovereignty over the Indian Ocean archipelago to the Mauritian government and secures the UK-US military base on Diego Garcia. However, the new Mauritian government says the previous administration sealing the deal may have been sold short. Daniel Arabmoy reports.
For decades, the UK claimed sovereignty over the Chagos Islands in the heart of the Indian Ocean, much to the frustration of nearby Mauritius, who believed from historical developments that the archipelago should be under its control. However, international pressure, an agreement reached in October where the UK would relinquish sovereignty over the archipelago but maintain a 99-year lease over Diego Garcia, home to a major UK-US military airbase. However, there's now a catch. A new government is in place in Mauritius after the opposition won in a November landslide. Now the new Prime Minister wants to revisit the deal, and in particular acknowledgements from the UK that Mauritius is sovereign over Diego Garcia. They are also not happy with the length of the lease.
In the objections that have been raised, it was not about the base itself. It was about the fact that that part of the territory has been exempted by the British again, which means they were instructed to hand over the entire territory, but they reserved a part of the territory like they did back in 1968.
Analysts say the new Mauritius government wants to ensure the terms of the lease are to its advantage.
If there's going to be a lease agreement, the cabinet and the parliament of Mauritius decides on the terms of lease and the amounts that must be paid to them for the lease. Number two, decide on the compensation and the developmental budget that must be paid by the United States.
There have also been objections to the deal, both in the West and locally on the Chagos Islands. In the UK, the opposition Conservative Party have heavily criticised it, saying it would give Britain's rivals in the Asia-Pacific region a significant edge. There were similar sentiments coming out of Washington. Meanwhile, some groups representing the interests of Chagosians have also expressed disquiet, saying they were excluded from the negotiations.
That was Daniel Arabmoy reporting. Finally, in North America, the suspect charged with murder in a shooting of United Health Insurance CEO Brian Thompson has appeared in court in Pennsylvania. The 26-year-old shouted angrily while being escorted into the U.S. courthouse on Tuesday. Sally Patterson reports.
26-year-old Luigi Mangione was arrested at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. Authorities say he'd been sitting at the fast food restaurant eating when an employee called the police. Officers say the employee recognized him from online photos released by police after Brian Thompson was fatally shot last week. Thompson was the CEO of United Healthcare and had been in Midtown Manhattan for an investor meeting. The shooter fled and a days-long manhunt ensued, both on the ground and online.
For just over 5 days, our NYPD investigators combed through thousands of hours of video, followed up on hundreds of tips, and processed every bit of forensic evidence, DNA, fingerprints, IP addresses, and so much more to tighten the net. We deployed drones, K9 units, and scuba divers. We leveraged the domain awareness system, Argus cameras, and conducted aviation canvasses.
A 3-page handwritten document was found with Mangione. Law enforcement officials say he seems to have some, quote, ill will towards corporate America and health insurance companies. Police say he was carrying several fake IDs, a US passport, a firearm, and a suppressor. Mangione was valedictorian of the class of 2016 at the Gilman School, a private school in Baltimore.
That was Sally Patterson reporting. Now recapping the headlines, Syrian ministers from the newly formed transitional government have met with members of the ousted Bashar al-Assad's administration to organize the transfer of state institutions. South Korean lawmakers are set to vote again this weekend on the opposition's move to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. And the suspect charged with murder in a shooting of the CEO of one of the largest health insurers in the US has made a defiant appearance in court. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We would welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Xi Zhi. Thanks for listening.